Hello, Hey Boomer community. My name is Wendy Green. I am your host for Hey Boomer. And Hey Boomer is the show for people who have recently retired, who are thinking about retirement, or maybe who have been in retirement for a while and they're asking the question, what's next? And we try to help answer that with the many topics that we explore. And this month, we're talking about money and our perception of money, our relationship with money as we age. The goal of Hey Boomer is to inspire our listeners to know that this next chapter of life will be relevant and meaningful. I have a personal interest in the topic of elder financial abuse, which is what we're going to be talking about today. When my grandfather died, my aunt and uncle became power of attorney for my grandmother, who was not in the best of health. And unfortunately, they ended up bankrupting her, and she ended up having to live the rest of her life in a Medicaid-supported nursing home. And by the time my parents found out, it was too late to do anything, and my father was just devastated. So the idea of elder financial abuse can hit just about anyone. My guest today is Frances Simon. Frances has been in the financial services industry since 1981. She is the founder of the PSG Group, a Greenville, South Carolina-based financial planning and investment advisory firm. She and the members of her firm are financial and investment advisor representatives with Park Avenue Securities. Frances is a wife, mother, and grandmother, and she likes to give back to her community by being involved in several local charities and church outreach programs. She enjoys discovering new places and traveling with her husband. She also has other hobbies, including gardening, sewing, cooking, reading, entertaining, and volunteering with arts organizations in Greenville. You can bet Frances is going to be a very involved and engaged retiree or an unretired person. Our discussion today is for informational purposes only. Since individual situations vary, the information she provides today should be relied upon only when coordinated with individual professional advice. Her answers are not to be construed as an offer or solicitation of a product or service. She is providing her opinion and anecdotal evidence, anecdotal information, and it is not necessarily the opinion of Park Avenue Securities. So now that we have the disclaimer out of the way, let's talk never too old stories. Have you heard about the Violins of Hope? These are violins that belonged to victims of the Holocaust. Israeli master violin maker Amnon Weinstein, born in 1938, founded the Violins of Hope in 1996. He has dedicated his life to their musical history. Many of these violins came from survivors and family members who played them, and he and his partner have painstakingly restored each violin. The Violins of Hope collection now consists of over 60 instruments, each with a story and history. Musicians have played the violins worldwide in concerts held in Jerusalem, Istanbul, Paris, London, Switzerland, Los Angeles, North Carolina, Ohio, Alabama, Tennessee, and Washington, D.C. And this month and May, they will be performing in South Carolina. So I hope many of you get the opportunity to enjoy these beautiful instruments, the Violins of Hope. My second story is about the Velveteen rabbit who turns 100 this year. I remember reading this story to my children and grandchildren, and the essence of the story never ages. If you recall, the little stuffed rabbit is feeling insignificant next to the newer, fancier toys. He wondered what it meant to be real. Real isn't how you are made, said the skin horse. It's a thing that happens to you when a child loves you for a long, long time. Not just to play with, but really loves you. Then you become real. Does it hurt? Asked the rabbit. Sometimes, said the skin horse, for he was always truthful. When you are real, you don't mind being hurt. Weeks passed, and the little rabbit grew very old and shabby. But the boy loved him just as much. He loved him so hard that he loved all of his whiskers off, and the pink lining to his ears turned gray, and his brown spots faded. He even began to lose his shape, and he scarcely looked like a rabbit anymore, except to the boy. To him, he was always beautiful. And that was all that the little rabbit cared about. He didn't mind how he looked to other people because the nursery magic had made him real. And when you are real, shabbiness doesn't matter. The lessons and the love in this story resonated in 1922 when the book was first published, and they continue to resonate today. And they make me think that we are never too old to be like the Velveteen Rabbit and to be loved. I hope you liked that. I'm going to bring Frances on. Hello, Frances.
Hey, everybody. Thank you. Those were great stories.
I know. I bet you read the Velveteen Rabbit to your grandchildren too.
Yes, and I was a violinist as a kid, so
wow.
So I'm going to hear Violins of Hope on May 4th.
Oh, awesome. Good. So they both resonated with you. That's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm so glad you're here to talk to us today because this is, like I said, a situation, this elder financial abuse can happen to anybody. So if you could just start with kind of defining what elder financial abuse or exploitation really means.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Financial exploitation is defined as wrongful or unauthorized taking, withholding, use of property or funds belonging to a specified person. With the elder portion of it, it can be any vulnerable adult who has a physical or mental impairment, but it is persons who are 65 and older. And usually, a potential exploiter gains the trust of this adult 18 or over, or with 65 and over with a mental and physical impairment, and abuses that trust. And it can be a stranger, a family member, a caregiver, or a phone caller. So that's what it is.
Yeah. Now, I read somewhere, Frances, that most of us believe that, these scammers can take advantage of older people. But many of us think we're too smart for that it's not going to happen to us. So what about the disconnect there?
Well, there is a huge disconnect there, and unfortunately, anyone who has a phone or a computer, anyone, business person, young person, old person, is susceptible to scamming. And you just have to understand that it's a scam and hang up. So that's the main thing. There is a lot of information now about elder financial exploitation, but in the past, it has been underreported, and it's hard now to find real numbers. But I can give you some real numbers if you're interested.
Yeah, and after you do that, talk about why you think it's been so underreported.
Okay, I can combine that in there. It is the fastest growing category of elder abuse in many states. And I have to look at my notes for this 2016 Investor Protection Trust Elder Investment Fraud Survey said that nearly 1 out of 5 citizens over 65 had been victimized by financial fraud.
Wow. 1 out of 5. Wow.
So to report abuse, those requirements have been around since the 1980s, but in 96, the current form of reporting financial abuse and a network to make that report to became active. The form is now uniform for all financial agencies, and it's called a suspicious activity report, better known as a SAR. And that form that was created is used currently, and the report then goes through the financial network of crimes reporting, and that has agencies like the FBI and all law enforcement involved in reading these reports. So historically, reporting of SARs or SARs in 2014 was the first time I got numbers, and that was around 22,000. That's it. 2015, it was 26,000. 2016, 53,000.
Wow.
2017, 66,000. So if you extrapolate that inflation rate into 2022, the amount of money reported that was attempted or lost of $1.7 billion, that would be in 2022 numbers, $5.2 billion.
Oh my gosh.
That is what we in the financial services world call real money.
Yeah. And you're still saying that's an underreported number.
Right. I think that report that I got the numbers from that was in the Office of Financial Protection of Older Americans, I think that will be reported more frequently. I think it's a 5-year report gathering those numbers from the agencies and extrapolating the actual losses is probably a difficult thing to do. I know that the systems exist to report it, but the public doesn't know. There are a couple other relevant things to know about that over half of the transactional losses came from a checking or savings account. So you think about that, how do you fix it? Well, you pay attention to your checking and your savings account. And another thing that your audience might be interested in is that the age gap, those who are 70 and older, reported double the losses for those under 70. So that should feel good if you're under 70. But the average amount, as I said, was 34. I don't know if I told you that. It's 34,000, and the highest amount was over 100,000. So that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
And
so what
numbers too.
And so what you're saying is that part of the reason it hasn't, or it is underreported, is because people don't know how to report it. Financial people do, but someone like me, you don't know how to report it. And I think there's also the shame factor, especially if it's a family member who's been the scammer, don't you think?
I think that's a big part of it. I think people who have been scammed are embarrassed to admit it. And when I started talking to people about being on this show, a friend of mine just said, hey, listen, I've had phone scams and, I play along with them. Well, the first one I ever experienced was Duke Energy saying, oh, by the way, you haven't paid your bill. And I go, I don't think so. goodbye, but somebody would be worried about the threat of cutting off their power. The other thing is the fear of retribution of the abuser.
Oh, I bet that's a big one. Yeah, talk about that.
Well, if it is a family member or a caregiver and they are very controlling, if they talked with another family member, they might be afraid that they would be hurt more or be physically abused. I think what can overcome that is the understanding that you can recover your loss and you can be better prepared for the future of a loss. So anyway, I think the SARS are important. I think knowing about it is very important.
So, what do some of these abuses look like? What does the abuser do to take advantage of this elderly person?
Well, primarily, I can give you specific examples. Primarily, the caregiver wins the trust of an elderly person and starts to pay bills for them. And of course, they want to be paid themselves, and they can be honest, great people that need to be paid. But instead of asking for help from a child or a neighbor or someone that they trust, they go ahead and say, let me take over your banking, or let me write the check out and you sign it. And then they get access online and go from there. So that is a very common thing. So
Yeah, I know one scam that happened to my mother that fortunately she averted, but she got a warning on her computer that it was infected. And when she called the number, she said, "Oh, a very nice man answered and was, very helpful, said he could fix it, but he needed access to my bank account so I could pay him." Fortunately, she knew to disconnect at that point. But as you said in the beginning, many of these elderly people that are taken advantage of have some kind of mental or physical disability as well. So, what are some of the things that can be done to protect ourselves and our elderly parents from these kinds of things?
I think the responsibility of a financial advisor is to know your customer. That is one of the rules of having accounts with a financial advisor, is to know your customer. Part of knowing your customer is that you want to keep them, so you want to know them. And as they get older, you want to know who their family is and what their plans are. And generally you do. We at our firm, and banks also do this, add trusted account persons or trusted contact persons. And we do this every time you open an account. Do you want to have a trusted account person? So do you want me to speak about that?
Yes, because I was telling you I heard a podcast about that too, trusted contacts. So yeah, tell us about that, how that works.
Well, it came out of the Safe Senior Act. Our federal government passed into law in 2018 the Safe Senior Act. And so they created for financial institutions under the regulatory bodies that I'm under, which are for advisors, and we're fiduciaries of accounts. And this trusted advisor is a contact person that I'm allowed to get all of their information and speak with them. And I know who they are. They know who they are, because the person opening the account gives them a disclosure and says, you are my trusted advisor. It can be a power of attorney, but it's not recommended that it be someone who can act on your account. because that can be abuse. Even though that's a small number of the reported abuses, it's only less than 10%. It can be that person. But when I communicate with someone, I am allowed to talk with them about non-reported, non-public information, like how are you, how's life, how are you doing, what's going on, anything, so anything going on in your life. If I suspect that I can't find them, I call the children that I know or the trusted contact that I know to say, I would like to know how your mom is, or I can then go into suspicious behavior that I've said she has not been answering my phone calls, and generally it's easily answered. Well, we moved her to a nursing home, we took away her cell phone, or something like that. So, what happens is there are red flags. Do you want me to say
Well, let me just say one more about the trusted contact. So say, like, I'm going to talk personal again. So my mother is in good mental and physical health. If she was to assign me, or probably not me, because I do have some access. If she was to assign her attorney, say, as a trusted contact, and you saw she put in an order to withdraw a large amount of money, how do you use that trusted contact in that situation?
Well, it would have to be a suspicious, uncommon thing. I would confirm with her what the intent was. I'd have to speak with her and, to confirm that this is what she really wanted to do. And it can be a red flag if she could not tell me what she wanted to do.
Right.
And it could be a red flag if it didn't meet what it is that I knew were her original goals. So, and then I can call him and say, do you know what's going on?
Right. And as a trusted contact, then he can't say, don't do that or do that. He would then reach out to her or to one of the children and say, is this reasonable that your mother's trying to do that? Is that right?
Right.
Yeah. So they really don't have any power except to try and check in.
Right. And when it is a power of attorney, or if you have children, more than one, like in your mother's situation, if she has 5 children, one can be power of attorney, one can be alternate power of attorney, but 3 could be the trusted contacts.
Okay. Yeah. And it seems like that would make a lot of sense to have that set up early while you're still healthy. So
Right.
if you should need it. Okay. All right. Great. Yes. Now I do want to hear about some of the red flags.
Well, the basic red flag is that a person is unable to understand financial concepts, simple financial concepts. You talk to them about something and they just don't get it. Now, people in the world of money tend to talk in another language. So you have to already communicate in a level and get verification that they do understand. So it's very common that we have to make sure that people understand the financial decisions that they make. And if they're simple ones that they're not getting, that's an alert. Sometimes they can be erratic. Sometimes they can call you more frequently than usual and not really remember. Memory loss is another. We had someone come into our office who was very unkempt, not dressed well, somewhat disoriented, did show up at the right time, but seemed very anxious. So you wondered what was going on. Another red flag is that, let's just say your mother was transferring a large sum of money and it was from something that had a penalty involved. If she did not understand that there was a financial penalty if it was like a withdrawal from an annuity, I would question that. What would be the consequences of the decision that you're making? Or a withdrawal of stock that has a lot of tax owed. So you have to be conscious of the consequences or the penalties of transactions. And I mentioned that they could be inconsistent with their original plan. Uncharacteristic wire transfers are a biggie. There also are deposits to their accounts. If you're seeing large deposits, you need to confirm those because of money laundering.
Huh.
And a caregiver could be money laundering and make deposits on a regular basis because someone's not aware of it.
Interesting. I never thought about that one.
Yeah. We're trained on anti-money laundering and senior dementia on a regular basis. But then the other thing is I want to change my beneficiary, or I've changed my will. I'm cutting out Wendy. She's gotten to be too much trouble. Or I've changed my healthcare directive and I don't want Wendy involved or something like that. So those are red flags.
And at that point, is that where you would also again reach out to that trusted contact? Yeah.
If it's you that she's changing, I would call you.
Right. And banks also have certain responsibilities to notice suspicious activity on accounts. Isn't that right?
That's correct. They are under the same SARS reporting through the FinCEN network. And I did pull out a statistics. It's financial, it's depository institutions. So they're depository institutions. Those include banks and brokerage firms. But then there are these money services business like Western Union and people that send MoneyGrams through Western Union or convert cash, and banks also convert to foreign exchange. So all of the people that handle money services businesses, including banks, are under the trusted contact and the SARS reporting regulations.
So what would a normal average person, normal is a big word, what would an average person do if, say, their mother had a caregiver, but they're out of state, so they're not there seeing what's going on, but they have suspicion that something is not right? What would just an average person do to check into that and to report something like that?
So you should make yourself known, or an average person should make yourself known to the law enforcement in that community. And if you're like Greenville, we have the Appalachian Council on Aging. So look up who their resources are for seniors, and they can give you some guidance on what to do in reporting that, because you have to gather your information before you actually make a report.
I would think so.
And, I'm not sure exactly where I wanted to bring this up in our conversation, but there is this thing that happens that people are not cognizant of, but it's called isolation. And unfortunately, a lot of seniors become isolated. They're afraid of getting out. They've lost a spouse. They don't drive anymore. So the normal situation would be, as a good neighbor, to check on someone that you know that's in that situation. But there is an effort nationally to create networks that are intergenerational. So recently I have been working with a client who's local, who's in her 90s, and she has an only child who lives 7 hours away. And I have inquired. I mean, that's her trusted contact and all of those things, and she's very involved in her life. But I've been asking her about her friends and her friend network and her church network, and who checks on her every day, and stuff like that. She does drive, but not much. Maybe she has self-regulated and said, I'm not going to be driving far. So she has widower that checks on her and brings her breakfast and has coffee with her. They used to meet at Hardee's, and then at about 2 or 3 in the afternoon brings her a main meal.
Wow,
So
sweet.
it's very sweet. It is very important. And I think isolation is something that we should talk with others about.
Yeah, so particularly if you have a family member out of town, what you're saying is make yourself known to law enforcement, find out who's the council on aging or senior support, and get to know the neighbors.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. That sounds good. So at the beginning of this month, one of our guests, we talked about having those difficult money conversations about wills and inheritance and medical directives and all of that. But in light of all of this, it seems like there are some more things that we need to include in those conversations. So what are some of the other things?
I think certainly the wills and medical directives are important. We need to also ask our parents or share with our trusted contact, because not all of us have children. I have boys, so that might be more difficult than people with girls, because girls tend to listen. But you need to know about what their wishes are for emergencies. Like, who would you prefer? What hospital would you prefer to go to? Are you an organ donor? Do you have a document that says in your medical living will that you want, no palliative care, nothing but palliative care, no advanced directives? Do you want your organs donated? And that is for all of us. So when you have that conversation with your children, I think it should be also asking, do your children or people that you know, have they done this? Have they stated that this is the way, if I were killed in a car wreck, I would want my organs donated? Or if I ended up in the hospital, this is the type of care I want. And I can tell you a little bit about my mom. We always knew that she would outlive my dad, which didn't happen. She had a major stroke. This was after a round the world cruise. So it was really, pretty nice that she got to do that. But she went downhill after that. And prior to that, I, just being the nearby caregiver, my sister was out of country a lot. I'd ask her, well, so what do you want, Mom? What do you want to have happen if something happens to you? I want someone to make sure I brush my teeth every day, and I want my hair brushed. So every day I'd like a little makeup on and a little lipstick. So it was just, I knew that. I had that conversation with her. Getting her to brush her teeth after her stroke was a big deal. She fought me, but after you got her to the sink with the toothbrush, she knew what.
Yeah. They're hard conversations, Frances, some of these. And, I think the whole conversation about money and, are you being taken advantage of, Mom? Are you managing to pay your bills on time, Mom? Are you, handling your investments? It makes them feel more insecure or more feeble, and that makes it even harder. So what do you suggest there?
think conversations get easier with delicacy and repetition. And I would say that knowing that you're doing this and that you're having this conversation with your kids and your kids are responding, saying, yes, we've done the things that we need to do, but let's all at a family celebration just celebrate the fact that we feel really good about having done this. And showing by example, I think, is probably very helpful. I mean, my parents had me nearby. I made sure that they were in good shape. My sister, on the other hand, wasn't. She didn't ever want to admit where she was financially. So that was a very difficult, she was a difficult person. So that I think conversations and having frequent conversations and this isolation bit, I think the more people are willing to reach out into their community, into their friend group, into their bridge group, to sit down, have a meal, have a time, a coffee, and bring up tough subjects. I think it's important. I mean, some people are turned off by the tough subject of money, but if it's that they don't understand it, maybe they need to talk to someone that is not a family member about this kind of stuff. It's hard to be faced with a bad situation, like you're in the hospital and you have to go to a nursing home.
Yeah, and I think you're right when you said sometimes it's better to talk to someone who's not in the family because that doesn't feel as threatening sometimes, if you're talking to a financial expert instead of your child or your spouse, you don't feel like you're being criticized, So maybe that would be a easier thing. I just wanted to mention a couple of other scams that I'm aware of, and maybe you've heard of others too. Besides the caregiver or the family member who might be taking advantage of people, there are phone scams where someone will call and pretend they're with the IRS and they say you owe back taxes and they're asking you to pay them then, or they're going to come and get you. I've heard people, I don't know if this is very common anymore, but I've heard where you'll get a call and say, I have your grandchild, and the only way you're going to get them back is if you pay the ransom. So there's all kinds of things that go on, and, it unfortunately, like this, and now the two-factor authentication for the online scams, so that you have to prove who you are before you can log in. I mean, unfortunately, there's all these things, and it makes it harder for those of us who were raised in a more trusting time, So I'm just thinking about how do you raise the awareness? Shows like this, I guess.
Well, I think shows like this are common, and I want to let the audience know that the Federal Trade Commission declared the week of March 6th Slam the Scam Week. And they had so much information on their website about it. And they had agencies create podcasts like this throughout the week on various subjects. The Social Security imposter one is a big one. And they did those they took a whole day and they reported those on March the 10th. So all day long, just a few weeks ago, they had Slam the Scam Day, and they reported on those in Spanish and in English. So that's an opportunity to, if you're having Bridge Club or if you're in a quilting bee or whatever, to just say, look, I was listening to this. You want to listen to it? I can turn it on or put the link on your phone or something like that. But they also straight out of the box said there are ways to recognize scammers that all of us should know. Aside from the hairs on the back of your neck raising, they look and sound like they're calling from someone you should know, like the IRS or Social Security. And they can also have come in on caller ID and say who they are.
I know, that's right.
But these agencies will never call you. Never. They will write you a letter. So a lot of them is a call that is not going to be real. You can add scam filters to them. The other thing is there's always going to be a big problem, like your grandson is in jail, or a big prize if you do this. And you must do this immediately. So that's a big deal. You have to do it right now. And they tell you specifically how you do it. Like go to Western Union or go to Walmart and buy 5 different $50 gift cards or something like that. So the main thing is just hang up. Some of them do come through the mail. I, as a business owner, have had 2 unemployment scams where people go to the South Carolina Office of Unemployment and file claims against my company, and they never worked there. And they give dates that they worked there, and you go, I'm sorry, but you didn't work there.
Wow. So much.
There's some that you're never going to escape. There's one called the sweetheart scam. I don't know if you've heard of that one, where a widow or a widower gets called on because they know they're a widower and someone wants to be their sweetheart and starts working their way into life. So,
yeah. So, a lot of not very nice people out there.
That's true. That's true.
So Hey Boomer, as you know, is a show for all of us who are wanting to stay relevant, engaged, meaningful, involved in our lives. And, my goal this month, talking about all these different money things, is to help people feel more intelligent and financially secure and less stressed about some of the things that can come up in financial situations. So I'm wondering if there are 2 or 3 takeaways that you would like to leave the audience with today regarding elder financial abuse.
Okay. It's not just elder, I'm an elder. But be intentional about getting your financial house in order. It's extremely difficult to do that, but every January when New Year's resolutions come around and you know that you have put off doing a new will since your husband died or checking in on your documents, make a plan for the tough times. And if you, like I do, know that organ donation is something that you want, make sure that that's in there. But at the same time, during this year, put a fun thing in it so that the beginning of the next year at New Year's resolution, you can say, yes, we did our updates on our wills and we did get to go to Mexico or something like that. So I would say be intentional, put the good, reward yourself. Get this tough stuff done, but also reward yourself. Another very important thing is be organized in your living space. Show your children where things are, because if there is a medical emergency or you should die, you don't want to leave your children the inheritance of a big mess in your house. I think that's just too hard. I mean, having done that when my dad passed away before my mom, it was February, and I knew he had to do taxes for that year. So I sat in his den and I said, okay, where's the stuff? And bless his heart, he had gathered it already and it was in a folder, so it was easy to do. So be organized. Let your family or your emergency contact person know where stuff is in your house. And then the third and the most fun thing that I have done is to write a letter to my children. And I've written more than one, but I put it at the top of a memento box. And the memento box is filled with things as we were cleaning out. I was a big keeper of every piece of art for hundreds of years. So I selected the things, and each child, each son has a box that slides under my bed, my guest bed, with their name in it. And on the top of it is a letter to them. And there's more than one. The cool thing about cleaning out my mess was I found one that my mother had written me. So that was so sweet. But put it in a spare closet. It could be for a friend. If you have a friend that has coveted your grandmother's vase, put that in a box and say, this is for Wendy.
I love that idea. I'm going to do that for sure. I love that idea. Thank you, Frances.
You're welcome.
Let me show people how they can get in touch with you. So if you have other questions, really about anything financial, pretty much, you can email Frances at fsimon@thepsgroup.net. And she also very kindly shared her work phone number with us. So you could actually call and leave a message there at 864-373-7201. Frances, this has been, the way you explain things is easy to understand. It's not like your typical money manager where you're like, what the heck? So I appreciate that about how you shared with us.
Thank you.
So I hope that all of you have found the month of April to be interesting and useful as we've talked about financial things. And we're switching gears in May. We are going to be talking about health, and I have a great lineup. We're going to be talking about relationship health, physical health, emotional health, and mindsets. And my first guest is a woman named Dr. Barbara Kaufman. She's a licensed psychologist and a comedian. What a combination, right? Barbara and I will talk about the importance of friendships between mothers, daughters, and girlfriends at every stage of life. And you can be sure this is going to be a fun and meaningful conversation. I'd like to remind you that if you like what we're doing, you can support the work that I'm doing here at Hey Boomer through the website buymeacoffee.com/HeyBoomer0413. April 13th was when I started the show 2 years ago. You can also always email me, ask any kind of questions, tell me if you want to be part of our Hey Boomer What's Next group. Email me at wendy@heyboomer.biz. And I want to thank you all for joining us today and being part of the Hey Boomer community. And I want to remind you also to live with passion, live with relevance, and live with courage. And remember that you are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. My name is Wendy Green, and this has been